people at all levels of local government there are involved in mortgage fraud, including sheriff's department, other local officials. There's her daughter had gotten a loan for a house, and then when Carol started looking into it, she'd not gotten just a loan, but 3 loans. And when she really started digging in, I believe, if memory serves, there were more than 3 loans. There were 9 properties, I believe, that were involved in this debacle. And it's my belief that it all comes back down to the securitization market, default swaps, international securities fraud. By uncovering this, she really has, in my opinion, she's really kind of left herself vulnerable, because these are the kinds of things that the establishment doesn't want exposed.
Okay, kind of. She's swimming around in the deep end of the pool. Carol,
she is swimming around in the deep end of the pool, yes. Do we have Carol with us yet? When you dig into these kinds of these kinds of goings on, you tend to make yourself kind of vulnerable, because when you get down to the big picture, you start seeing the behind the scenes stuff. You kind of tend to become a target. If these people are going to commit this level of crime, I don't think there's anything they would do to silence someone and keep them from exposing it. So I think it's very, very important that we have Carol on.
Do you say would do or wouldn't do?
They would not.
Yeah, they would.
There's nothing that
they wouldn't do. Yeah.
There's no stop button. Once you start into this kind of fraud, into this level of corruption, there's no stopping it. You've kind of started yourself on a path of no return. And we find this quite often with a lot of politicians, that they put themselves on a path of no return. They're owned by the establishment, because once you're in, they've got the goods on you. And if you turn tail, there's nowhere. Like I was saying, once you start down this path of corruption, and you get this deep into the corruption, the establishment owns you. I mean, we get into high level politics, and we realize that our leaders, and I've got a problem with that. In a free world, you're not supposed to have leaders. You're supposed to be the leader. But our most of the high level political establishment, they're just disgusting, filthy, ugly people. They've done things, well, for example, read an article the other day, a news article about the Roman Catholic Church. I don't want to get off on religion, but I'm just using this as an example, that pedophilia and human sacrifice, that is, of infants and children, is kind of a prerequisite to take a seat in the papacy. It's no different in high levels in government. The establishment owns you, and they don't want these kinds of secrets out in the open. They don't want to get caught with their pants down, per se. But it seems like Carol caught them, several of them, with their pants down, and she shined a light on it. So we wanted to bring her back on so that we could have her in the spotlight. There's no safety in the shadows. There's only safety in the light.
Good, wonderful. Okay, you're coming in very
Hi,
well.
Randy.
Okay, will you kind of start at the top here and explain what has been going on in your world, and then I'd like to kind of discuss this. So go ahead and start at the beginning.
Since the last show that I did?
No, start at the beginning, for assuming nobody's ever heard of any of this.
Oh, okay. Good, yeah, because there was a couple of things that I transposed, a couple of transactions. My daughter was foreclosed upon around September of 2012. She was 24 to 26 when she bought her first home. She worked for the state of Indiana. She's a single parent of 2 minor children, 2 boys, and she bought a home from reportedly First Horizon Home Loans, a division of First Tennessee National Bank. So she came in and told me, I'm just going to let it go, and I was rather sick at the time, or had been told I was sick by several doctors. And I said, well, I'm not doing anything anyway. Just let me look at these documents. And she's like, no. I said, no, let me. So she brought over a few items, and I went to her house. I said, let's get everything. I want everything. And I made her go to the basement. And she's like, Mom, I said, let's get them all. So we got into a file cabinet, and I brought home a big bag full of everything. Probably everything but the kitchen sink was in there. All of her mailings and everything. She kept everything, which is a good thing. So I don't know, about the second or third night of looking through these files, I opened up a white binder from Lingle Real Estate, which is the real estate firm that she went to a man named Tim Orr, who's a Lingle real estate agent, and bought her first home. It was located on Randolph Street here in Richmond, Indiana. And when I opened it up, I expected to just see her home buying papers. Well, what I found was she reportedly bought 1 home, but I found 3 properties within the file. I found 9 loans. And the loans, there were different HUD-1 settlement statements for 2 different amounts, but there were 9 loans total. There was a title invoice for the title insurance, and it was with Abstracts Title of Richmond, Indiana, which is a title company here in Richmond, Indiana, that is owned by the county and city attorneys partnership law firm. They operate within the same building, along with a Sailor Street Investments. They are hooked on to U.S. National Bank via a skywalk over the alley. And the bank that was foreclosing upon my daughter was U.S. National Bank, the one that's hooked to the title abstract. She got the loan from First Horizon, she thought. However, U.S. Bank was quickly, within 14 days, assigned as a new servicer via a letter that I saw in there. So very quickly, before 30 days was even up, First Horizon Home Loans allegedly gave the rights to servicing to this U.S. Bank National Association. So I called up the real estate agent, Tim Orr. It's a small community. I called him up, and I identified myself as Carol Isaacs, which is my married name. I said I'm Rachel Diddy's mother.
Rule Law Radio, folks. Before we, and let me apologize for the technical difficulties starting there. Sometimes technology is a wonderful thing when it decides to work right. We've got a guest with us tonight, Carol in Indiana. Now, Carol, before we went out to break, you were talking about, I believe it was Tim Orr. Is it O-R-E? O-A-R? How do you spell this guy's name? I mean, let's put it on the record who these people are.
Okay. It's O-R-R is the way his name is spelled on the documents.
Okay.
So he's a real estate agent for Lingle Real Estate. He sold my daughter a house in 2008, reportedly March 14th of 2008. So I called him up after I discovered this file with the 3 properties and the invoice for a title insurance for several different properties and 9 loans and some international promissory notes. I forgot to add that, and different things inside the file. It was a big white binder. So I called him up and asked him if he had a few minutes, introduced myself, asked him if he had a few minutes. He said, sure, how's Rachel? I said, well, she's doing all right, except she was foreclosed upon. He said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, yeah. I said, the funny thing is, we've got I'm looking at this file I opened up. There's 3 properties in here and 9 loans. And he's like, oh, my effing God. I'll call you right back. Or he said, can I call you right back? I have it in an affidavit. I wrote it down when he said it, notes. But anyway,
I take it he wasn't
right
expecting
away.
you to have that file?
Right. But he did know that he had done something with that file, because I later, in searching through more documents, found where he had sent her a letter saying, I know it gets very hectic being a first-time home buyer, let me go ahead and give you these HUD-1 settlement statements. You don't have to dig in your papers for these for tax time. You just use these. So he's a very successful. He's self-proclaimed busy man. He's top sales and all this locally. So I suspect he doesn't mail those out to every homeowner that bought a home from him. So he had mailed her special HUD-1 settlement statements for at tax time. So I suspect he knew it, but those documents didn't see the light of day till I pulled them out in her defense. Whenever U.S. Bank National Association, NA, which, by the way, I do want to bring that up. I didn't get to the last show. When they do that in the pleadings, U.S. Bank National Association, N.A. That is two entities. That's a national association, which could be any bank for all anybody knows. Now, that's just good. I mean, if you took English at all, when you put a comma after something and you've got the NA, they've ruled on gun right cases in Illinois that that's two entities. That's two separate issues when there's a comma. So it was U.S. Bank National Association, NA versus Rachel Diddy, 89D02-1209-MF for mortgage foreclosure -000343 in Wayne County, Indiana, under a Judge Gregory Horn, who is the judge who has had this property for 14-plus years to date under his rule. In several transactions, it's going to be discovered here. I'm going to tell you about it shortly. So after he hung up, I right away called the title company and spoke with Robin Moore, who was the office administrator for Abstracts of Richmond Title Incorporated, Abstracts Title of Richmond Incorporated. And she's in with the law firm Boston Beaver, Keihn, and Cross, and Chidester. Ron Cross is the county attorney. Walt Chidester is the city attorney. Mr. Boston, Richard Boston, is the one who prepared the title policy invoice. So I opened up this title policy invoice from Abstracts Title of Richmond. It was about 10 pages. There was one page missing. It had a fax transmission across the top, so I was able to see all the different transmitting parties that it went to. She had bought this home reportedly March the 14th, 2008, yet Alta had supplied forms that backdated the title policy in her name by a number of years. So here she was, the potential buyer. They put it in the potential buyer's name by a number of years, and when they do this, that makes the buyer the seller. And they started this little 3-property scam. It's called the magic hat trick in accounting, which I learned later. I didn't know that at the time. I had to do a lot of research. But she bought a home on Randolph Street. There was a home, a county property, 10,007, State Route 38. And then there was another home that was 4385, State Route 35. It's a U.S. Highway 35. So there was 3 homes in there. There was a backdated title policy. There was a forged mortgage affidavit stating she was married. It didn't say who she was married to. She had thought she had made, whenever she first went to see Tim Orr, this real estate agent, she made an offer of $60,000. And he told her that the owner did not accept the offer. The owner was Paul Stickle of Stickle Properties, LLC, so that she would have to fill out another offer. Well, she didn't know at the time she was actually filling out real estate forms, and they're 5 pages long, and then they offer addendums under the Real Estate Association. They have forms already made out. So she thought she made an offer, but it's actually a purchase agreement on improved property. And it states clearly in there that is the master mortgage. That is the original binding contract. So she had done that January 21st. He told her it was not accepted. She came back in and made an $8,000 more offer, $68,000. And he told her February the 5th that the owner had accepted that offer. But what Tim Orr didn't tell her was that he had ran those 2 concurrently and he had taken, and this is what's different from the last show, I transposed these two. He had taken a January 21st, he had made a duplicate, so he was running 2 January 21st purchase agreements, one for her property on Randolph Street. The other one went to the 10,007 State Route 38 in Greens Fork, Indiana, the county property, and the February 5th purchase agreement / offer went to the 4335 or 4385 State Route 30 US 35. So the second one went to another property within the city. So she didn't know it at the time, though. So they used her name in various forms. I actually even found inside one of the purchase agreements at the U.S. Highway 35, the 4385, where her and the reported owner of her property were buying it together. It's as clear as day. They're both buyers. It's her name and his name. They're both buyers. Within an amendment, an addendum to the purchase agreement / offer. So that was what was inside that file that I discovered.
So it sounds like they're using your daughter's credit to make somebody else look as though they have enough credit to make the purchase. And by filing them all at the same time, then the banks, whoever's looking at the offer checks your daughter's credit. Your daughter's credit's fine, and then the other bank checks your credit and it's fine, but it's all at the same time. So the one doesn't know about the other offer, and this is something to do with 82. Go ahead.
Yeah,
is that what they were doing, or did they have something else going on?
No, she paid $6,150 down, which was the original January 21st purchase. The purchase agreement offer, the first offer she made for $61,500. That's 10% of that offer. Now they may have ran it like a 2080, like you said, but she actually paid in cash
what I'm
with
saying
her own
is,
funds.
Hold on. They ran all of the notes at the same time. That's what they do with 80/20s. They run both the 80 and the 20. If they ran them both, if they ran them as one document, the amount would be too much to pass their credit. So they break it into 2 separate documents, 2 separate notes, and they run them both at the same time. The one who's looking at them only thinks there's one. He doesn't know about both of them, because both of them would come up too high. So they run them in the same day. So whoever's looking at it doesn't know about the others. And when you first talked about this, I got the impression that they were taking someone with good credit and sticking her name on this thing to make it look like the purchaser had or they're actually stealing somebody else's credit. We are back. Randy Kelton and Steve Skidmore of Real Law Radio, and we're talking to Miss Carol in Indiana, and we're talking about she found more loans than she thought she would. And when we went out, I was commenting on the credit side, but I think I should keep my mouth shut because there's a whole lot more to this than a simple credit scam. We go on, Carol?
Yes, certainly. I found that they had taken the January 21st offer that she had made, and they had duplicated that. So there were 2 of those. And then the February 5th that they had her sign under the pretense of another offer, yet it was a purchase agreement for improved property, because this is one of the tricks the industry does. The real estate laws I have since...
Wait a minute, I thought this was just an offer.
No, it was actually, she thought it was an offer as well, but what she actually signed, and what many people do, because I've looked at 4 or 5 of them, are purchase agreements on improved property. They think it's an offer. They think the real estate agents' papers that they're signing are just an offer, but they are actually purchase agreements. And if they'll read the fine print, I find that, and I've found this, I did it myself, I didn't read the fine print. If you read it, it says it's the original binding contract.
Wow.
That is the main mortgage, and it has the amount and the terms and everything within it, and it's under Pennsylvania real estate law, which is what most of the real estate associations operate under. Even though they're in different states, Pennsylvania is a big player here in the real estate law. So the real estate associations in Indiana are tied directly to Pennsylvania law under real estate. So they get the forms basically from Pennsylvania, and they use them here in Indiana, much like the multi-state mortgages we're seeing, or deeds of trust at the bottom where it says multi-state. They have an origin, and it's usually one place. So they use them throughout the United States.
Yes, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, uniform instrument, and it will have a number. Each state has a different uniform instrument number designation.
Right. So, that's the skeleton of it. So, anyway, she signed a purchase agreement for improved property on the January the 20th, and each one of these purchase agreements / offers she thought was an offer, they had international promissory notes attached to them, and she had executed those as well. She thought it was the earnest money receipt for the earnest money she paid to make the offer, which was $500. Well, I find these
international notes very interesting. I've got kind of I guess it would be a rhetorical question. Why an international promissory note?
I believe
I don't mean to go down an unnecessary rabbit hole, but it raises a red flag to me when I hear the word international promissory note.
Well, it's called L-108. It's to escape tax liability by the real estate agents and the reported owners who aren't really the owners of record, because all of these properties had straw owners. They weren't real people.
Okay.
So all three of the properties, or they were deceased, and that's another reason to make her married, because one of the county property, it is my belief that it was owned by a dead veteran. And what they did was use my daughter to be married to this person, and then she then quitclaim deeded it, so they used her identity in fraudulently. She quitclaim deeded a dead man's property to this other person who wasn't real. It was a straw purchaser, and so she gave away that property right away after they financed it through her identity.
Well,
so
that's
then
nice
she moved on to the next. Yeah, and this is what I believe as well. So each one of those purchase agreements / offers, they had an international promissory note, and it has L-108 up in the upper corner. They're totally perfected. There's 3 of them attached to all 3 purchase agreements / offers, and they went to what I call the High Road Bank in London, which is a Federal Reserve Bank. It's the main Federal Reserve Bank, and the reason I know this, and I'm just going to tell everybody, because my uncle is a banker, and I'm going to admit it. I have bankers and there's been attorneys in my family and everything, and I love my family. However, and he loves me. I asked him to run these
you
loans.
Had bankers and attorneys. You have been so
I have bankers
tarnished.
I had attorneys in my family, but I have a banker in my family. In my, he's my uncle.
Oh, you poor woman.
And I love him. He's just, but anyway, he ran these. He told me they came from MetLife. So that's where Metropolitan Life Insurance Company demutualization will come in. But anyway, where she thought she had purchased from First Horizon Home Loans, a division of First Tennessee National Bank. This was in March of 2008. They ran 2 of the loans, the first 2 loans through MetLife, and I called the Indianapolis office of First Horizon Home Loans in 2012. It had then became Caliper, but they just changed their name, and the lady told me. I gave her the loan number. She said, looks like they've been purged. And I said, well, if they were purged, you wouldn't be able to see it. She goes, no, it says purged right here. She said they were purged the very same day they were put through.
That's interesting.
So the first 2 amounts, one was for $61,500 and the other one was for $61,800. Those were taken through MetLife and purged. They immediately took the second, February the 5th, the one that she thought she was getting the loan for the home for. They took the $68,000 something. It ended up being $66,948, and First Horizon sent her an invoice on 3/14 It was paid on 3/14, her first payment, plus the back interest of 4% per day. That was taken out. And, of course, I had the crook file. Remember, that's what I call that, what Tim Orr, the Lingo real estate agent, sent to my daughter by mistake. Right. So I looked at it, and all the numbers matched up. And what they had done was there were 2 TILAs in there. There were papers in there for insurance in the amount. I didn't get to talk to you folks about this last time, Randy or Steve. There were insurance commitments for $131,000. There was another one for $128,000, and then of course I had the backdating of the Alta policy. And so what I did was I took everything before I went and called up Robin Moore at Title Abstracts of Richmond. I took everything to Office Max. I put it in chronological order. I mean, I went over and over and over it. Put it in chronological order, had it professionally photo scanned. Because one of the things I found on the title policies is at the bottom it said that it subscribed to Consumer Financial Services. So I knew to look up any patents they had under that. And there was a guy from Japan who had a patent with this Consumer Financial Insurance Services, and I can't remember the exact name. He had a patent for an inkjet sprayer that did it super fine. And in order to bring up the ink, now, it wasn't invisible ink where you'd write on it. It was actually an inkjet sprayer that sprayed it super fine. You had to use an old scanner to bring up the number, and you had to have it. You had to photocopy it. That's why a lot of these insurance companies and different title companies, you might see old equipment sitting around because they need it, because they're using the old technology and the new. So when I had that photo scanned, her title policy, I'm going to give you an example, was C31098. But on the third page, underneath the tear strip, I brought up the agricultural lien that went with that policy because they used that ink for First Consumer Financial Services, and it was an Alta form. So I was able to bring up the agricultural lien that ties to Washington, D.C., to that title, which is a lender's title policy. But trust me, I believe that there are buyers, since they made her a buyer, right, and a seller, and a buyer, and a seller. So there's several insurance policies where they were milking the insurance claims and reinsurance behind the scenes.
Do you know who the beneficiary is to these insurance policies?
I do know that it was not my daughter, and she is the one, by her signature, that created the money that they took, because they certainly didn't put it where it should have went. They couldn't have. They would have been a dead giveaway.
Yeah. I hear the music in the background. Sounds like we're going to break. We're with Carol in Indiana. Folks, stay tuned. You're listening to Rule of Law Radio on, what is the date today?
May the 30th.
Friday.
May the 30th. That's right.
We'll be right back.
We are speaking with Carol Keihn in Indiana, and Carol, you have uncovered quite a web of corruption. International, sounds like international securities fraud, insurance fraud, bank fraud, and all perpetuated by the local, so far in this story, the local title company and a few loan officers. So just how far does this rabbit hole go? Tell us more.
Well, it goes in and out, so it's kind of like a sewage hole. You go in and out for the properties. You know, each property has a sewage that they pull things in and out of. So
yeah, like any other bucket of muck, it doesn't stink until you stir it. So let's stir this pot some.
Right, a sludge fund. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
a sludge
exactly.
Tank. So one of the things that on these promissory notes that were attached, I wanted to make a point on this, and then I'll move on because there's more. And it wasn't anything that I'm not a special type of person. I was just blessed to have found the information in time to, I think, save my daughter from all of this false prosecution. Those international promissory notes were attached to the main master mortgages. People need to, if they can, pay attention to your documents, and if you have those things, the real estate papers, get them out and look at them again and look for any backdating or anything that looks out of the ordinary On the very first one she did, January 21st, I noticed that the real estate agent or someone in the real estate firm had put RD at the bottom of each page. And then on the promissory note, the first one, they put RD. So I was looking at the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, and under Articles 3, 8, and 9, it is required that all parties are in agreement based on that pledge or that signature on a perfected promissory note based on future pledges to pay the mortgage, which everybody thinks is the master mortgage in the land records. I say it's not, because my daughter's papers show the mortgage. It's a two-sided document. So I'm noticing that pages 2, 4, 6, and 8, or pages 1, 3, 5, and 7 could be interchanged, because in our records at our local office, they're one-sided documents. However, in the file that I found, it's a two-sided document clearly.
Yeah, most of your bank, most of your loan documents are going to be one-sided. And that is print on one side of the paper, not on both sides of the paper. Let's make that clear.
Well,
so somebody put a lot of thought into this.
Yes, well, it's very common, and these folks did not know my daughter. She knew none of them. Not a one of them. She didn't know Jessica McGuire, the loan officer for First Horizon Home Loans. She didn't know Sean Sorrell, the notary and escrow closing agent. She didn't know Tim Orr, the real estate agent for Lingo Real Estate, or Jason or Kristen Rader, who are a married couple who are real estate agents working under the buy, sell, buy program of Lingo Real Estate. And guess what? They work for you too. They got the number 2 in there. So they work for you too under the buy, sell, buy program. People, if they'll start paying attention, you'll start seeing a lot of that buy, sell, buy. And this is key here, because what happened back in, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, that purchase agreement / offer with the promissory notes attached, it's my belief and my understanding and my claim that what they did to her was they took that $500 promissory note, and there was 3 of them, and they went to the High Road Bank or a Federal Reserve Bank, one of the nationally chartered banks, and they said, hey, she's going to pay you this amount, and this amount. So they made up these future contracts. But the key here is, if they didn't inform her of what they were doing, then I say they violated laws under the UCC, and she's not obligated, and that means all future contracts are null and void, and she keeps property.
Let me touch on
because
something
the only reason
here.
they got the money was based on her signature.
Let me touch on something here that keeps kind of banging around in my head. When a loan is generated by a lender, the lenders will create pools for their notes. Each pool can only hold notes, and this is under Ginnie Mae. Each pool can only hold notes with the same interest rate. A lender's pool can hold as little as 3 notes. The lender then negotiates these notes into a pass-through trust. Well, when the note is filed with Ginnie Mae, under the Ginnie Mae manual, you can get the manual online. It requires that the lender forward all the documentation to the document custodian, who's usually the servicer. And the document custodian is it's an agent for Ginnie Mae. I want to say confirmation. Confirmation is not the word. They can bind Ginnie Mae to the contract. And before they issue that confirmation, they must determine that all of the documents are in accordance with the mortgage requirements. And then they're to maintain possession of all of these documents until termination of the note. So here's what keeps ringing around. The derivatives, insurance contracts. what is to keep the lender from taking a note that is in a certain person's name at a given interest rate, and filing it with a different servicer with a different interest rate? Just change the interest rate and file it with somebody else. And then file it with another one. And another one, and another one. Each of these servicers would not necessarily know that these others were going on. And then they go to AIG or whoever's providing the derivative insurance policies, which are totally unregulated, and buy a mortgage insurance policy on each one of these. And China accused Bank of America of selling them the same loan 30 times. So what they do is they start paying the insurance premiums on each one of these each time the borrower makes a payment. And then at some point they do their best to force the buyer into foreclosure. If they can force the buyer into foreclosure, then all of these mortgage insurance premiums pay off, and they'll pay 85% of the original principal. So, I missed a part. They negotiate each one of these into a pass-through trust, and then they sell these to your retirement funds. So when they foreclose, the insurance company comes in and pays off 85% of principal. So the investor is only left with a maximum of 15% loss. But the lender has sold this thing 10, 15, 20 times. And each time he gets 103% on the average, 103% of the original principal. So he's sitting here with this very large pool of money. And if he can push the contract into foreclosure, the insurance company pays off on all of these. Why do you think the insurance companies needed $7 billion? That was more money than all the money invested in real property in the country. And that's because they multiplied it over and over. And when I'm listening to what you're doing, it seems to me to be pointing right toward just exactly that. What do you think?
That sounds right. I do think that. One of the things I noticed on her TILA, the RESPA, under the RESPA, she signed on the house reportedly 3/14 of 2008. And I happened to be watching my grandchildren on that day, so that is the day. But they came up with the last minute that they had to cancel. They had to prolong the day before she was supposed to have gotten a cashier's check for certified funds to pay them her down payment, because she paid a down payment. So they had her dated for 3/13 of 2008. And on the RESPA, they had it dated 3/13 of 2008. But on 3/14 is when they actually pushed it off for her to go in and close escrow. And, of course, there was a flurry of paperwork and a lot of signing and things that went on, and they were in a big hurry. And the reported owner of the property, he was in a big hurry. He had to leave town, and they do that often. I've heard those stories before from other people, and my daughter told me this, so I believe her. So they actually had the RESPA and the hazard insurance she got from a local insurer was dated effective 3/13 the day before. And that is a big indicator to me that there was insurance, like let's say there was timestamps on the purchase agreement /offers as well of 7 p.m. That takes it back to negative 11 hours universal time clock time, which over in Australia, there's a little country where that'll take it back and they can collect the insurance over there on an international level a day before.
That I didn't understand. They can collect the insurance the day before.
Yeah, they had her 90 days in default before she even signed, making her the buyer prematurely when she was not the owner, or making her the owner prematurely when she was the buyer. She wasn't the owner, but they put it in her name to the year 2006, Randy and Steve.
Oh.
It's clearly in her name, effective February 5th, 2006.
Okay,
it was
wait,
in
hold on.
my daughter's name.
Hold on, we're about to go to break. This is Randy Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Wheel of Our Radio, here with our special guest, Carol Isaacs. Give us a call. We'll be taking...
Carol Keihn. All radio, folks. Over the break, we got the name correct. Carol Keihn Isaacs. So we'll just call her call her Carol. So Carol in Indiana. When over the break we were discussing some of the before we get down this rabbit hole, I would like for you to come bring this whole thing, bring it full circle, and then I would like to I'd like to get into some of the indicators. You know, some of the things in the documents that people can look for to see if their situation is similar to your daughter's. It's very important that we know what we're looking for when we're looking for it, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll never find it. So, I think before we went to break, you were talking about the RESPA disclosures, Real Estate Settlement Procedure disclosures, and Truth in Lending Act disclosures.
The RESPA was dated the day before closing, and so anyway, I just noticed that. So I'll go on with what happened, the actual facts of what happened. After I went down and talked to Robin Moore at Title Abstracts of Richmond, Indiana, I gave her a fully color scanned disc, and I showed her the document. It was a bug pest control report. Page 1 showed the bug pest control report, and page 2 showed the fraud contingency, and one of them was a frauded contingency with totally different terms of contract, and then the other one was a mortgage affidavit stating that my daughter was married. And as I said, she was a single parent, and she actually had not been married. So I knew that something was wrong, and they were both on the back of bug inspection reports. And Robin Moore said, well, that's normal. I said, hey, it is not normal to have page 2 of a bug inspection report, a forged mortgage affidavit, because I had asked for this Sean Sorrell, this notary, this escrow closing agent, and of course they said that she didn't work there anymore. But she still is working, and she is still in the real estate business at a different place, but she does still do work for these people, I've since found out. So I left there, and I went down to the land record office, and I went in and was talking to the lady in the plat room and looking around for various tax years. I thought, here's 3 properties, and they dated it back to 2006. I'm going to look at everything. I noticed that the years 2006 and 2003 were missing from the tax records. So they said they didn't know where those books were. So then I went to the property records, and I was looking around. There was another lady in there. There was a clerk who I said, this reportedly Paul Stickle owned this property, and he's been in trouble for a lot of fraud. Of course, the county and city, he never got in trouble at all. And that was prior, probably 2008, and this was in 2012. There was an older lady in there, and I didn't know it at the time. I thought she worked there, and I told her, I said, it looks like they've even taken my grandchildren's identity because one of the loans had their socials and their information on there. So there was 9 of them. So there was actually one with several addendums to it. So I was worried about their identities as well. And I told her about it. And the older lady, who I thought worked there, goes, well, I'm sick of these bees doing this. And she said a bad word. And the lady that actually worked there, said, I've already helped her. She says, I don't care. I'm going to help her again. And she went over in the far corner and looked over at me. She goes, I'm going to pull an anchor date search. She goes, remember that. It's called an anchor date search. And she printed out a 4-page paper, and it actually says anchor in the search field. She printed out 4 pages. So here's my daughter's property on Randolph Street. There's a property on Highway 35, a county property on State Highway 38. And she pulls in yet a 4th property. And this 4th property is 938 South 17th. It had my daughter's property tucked into it via a land contract that was not recorded in any of the public records. It wasn't showing on its face. In addition to that, it showed a sheriff's deed, which means there was a foreclosure sale. So I went and I left, and I called the sheriff's office. There was a Laura Roberts on there. She's a deputy sheriff. I called to see if she might know something about it, because the sheriff, Matt Strittmatter, doesn't work there anymore. He's been promoted to excise for the state of Indiana. So I called Laura Roberts, and I explained to her who the reported buyer of this property was. I said, it appears, that he bought this and it's not being disclosed. And I told her his name was Paul Stickle. And she said, oh, no. And she said, well, I want you to go over to the courthouse. I said, I want to just make sure everything's in order. And she said, it is. She goes, I want you to go over to the courthouse and get this cause number. And it ended in 00025. And I said, that's got an extra zero. And she said, Carol, listen to me. I want you to go over and get the cause number I told you to get. So I went over to the courthouse, and there was an elderly lady there, and I was expecting to see maybe a quarter of an inch thick case, because according to the foreclosure ending in 0025, it was a 3-month-old case, just 3 months old, and it was done and over with. It was showing in the public records as it was over with. It didn't have the property address listed in the heading either, so you couldn't tell what property it was for. I go over there, and I brought my friend Linda from Peru with me, and I just started handing her copies, and I said, I got to go get some more money, so some more Federal Reserve notes. I went over to my bank across the street and came back. But anyway, it ended up being 9 properties within this court case file with the clerk of courts, and I thought, well, I've got a clerk of courts secret file. This is what I have here. It has 9 properties in it. It had the state of Indiana, like usually when people look at their pleadings, they'll see the state listed in the middle, or they used to. It was moved over in line with the bank. You actually was listed as Mears. Mears was the foreclosing entity for a Deutschland trust, and then it had a comma, so I knew there was more, but it didn't have in there who it was for, the trust was for, but it was Mears. And it had parties listed, and the parties included the judge. He was under the parties.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not. It's right in the 11-page clerk of court summary. No one was to have seen this file that kindly Deputy Laura Roberts, who is another female and a mother probably, and maybe a grandmother for all I know. She helped me. That's what I know. She told me to go get that. I went and got it, and I got copies, and I boogied out of there, Linda and I did. I went back in about a week later to get something, and the lady was, one of the clerks goes, you'll not get back in our record room. And I said, what did I do? She said, you got the judge's file. I said, well, I didn't know I got the judge's file. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but thank you for telling me. I said, I had no idea. I was just doing what I was told. I even went down to the library to make sure that the sheriff had published this foreclosure, because it wasn't showing on the records, and there was a record in the microfiche of this property being advertised for sale. Now, the title company didn't reveal that to anyone. They didn't reveal that it was under a contract under another property, 938 South 17th. So then I had to take apart this secret judge's file. I have the Crooks file. I have the fourth property from the anchor date search, and it makes perfect sense with maritime law. And then I've got this now reported judge's file per the clerk that I went in. She said it's a judge's file, and there's notes in there such as Eric Welch from Delaware County says that he didn't get to do a deposition. Can we go ahead and sign it? It says, yes, sign it. No deposition, go ahead and sign it, because all it is every entry down throughout there, it shows the paper trail. So it would say they served this Annette and Charles Scott supposedly owned the property. They said they served them at 422 Randolph. It said they served them at 202 North 16th Street. It said they served them at 4335 or 3385 State U.S. Highway 35. It said they served them at 938 South 17th. This was in 2012 and 13. This case was still going on from 2006, and it was reportedly for 3 months in the year 2006, and it showed a check from Paul Stickle to the sheriff of Wayne County, which was Matt Strittmatter, and it showed all the paperwork there. And then there were Mears checks written to the Wayne County Clerk of Courts, Mears, to the Wayne County Clerk of Courts, and those I am alleging, and I believe, are on the 938 South 17th that was foreclosed upon in April of 2009, and my daughter was current even on the falsely assigned loan that she was paying. She was current, and this is a judicial foreclosure state, and they were running behind the scenes in a secret file within our judicial.
You know, something that comes to my mind, Carol, you say there's 9 properties attached to 3 different loans in your daughter's. Have you done any research on these other 8 properties?
Yes.
Do they even exist?
Yes. And they've been foreclosed upon. They're foreclosing. Oh, you just wait till what Randy and I talked about last night. It gets better, Steve.
Okay.
So, anyway.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. It just that crossed my mind.
Okay.
I'm wondering, do these properties even exist? Are they ghost properties? I mean, you've got straw people
exist.
behind the thing.
They have straw owners behind it because inside of that, one of the things I noticed was in the heading of this, the judicial file that I found from the year 2006, it doesn't list the property anywhere in the heading. It lists Annette and Charles Scott, and it lists Jane and John Doe's, and it lists a Betty and William Cross, or William and Betty Cross, who I happen to know William Cross has been deceased since at least 1999. And this was in 2012, right, or 13, whenever I went up to get that file. I think it was in 2012 when I did. He had been deceased a number of years, but they were steadily trying to serve this William and Betty Cross at 2717 'B Street. So the county attorney is named Ronald Lloyd Cross. So here is a William and Betty Cross, which I suspect are his parents, if not his aunt and uncle, but I'm pretty sure it's his parents. And he is the county attorney that owns Title Abstracts of Richmond that's hooked on to U.S. Bank via the Skywall, that's hooked on to the city and county attorney's law firm, and Sailor Street Investments, which is hooked on to a monument on U.S. Bank called Sailor Street Monument, that's hooked on to the Statue of Liberty in New York.
Wow. And the plot thickens. I hear the music in the background, folks. We're going to break. We'll be right. Oh man, this is good. I mean, it's not a good situation, but it's good that, Carol, that you've taken the time to eke this out and bring this to light. So,
well, one of the reasons that I did was because when she got the original wrongful foreclosure, what I'm alleging is a wrongful foreclosure.
Absolutely.
They were using rather strong language with her, and I thought she had actually been unemployed at that time in 2012, and she was supposedly under the protection of a HARP 2 loan of the Obama administration that was brought in to help distressed homeowners, and she had been unemployed, so she was under that protection when they came in to foreclose upon her. And they had called her the maker of the drawer. So when it originally happened, I took great offense to that when I looked up the word, and I understand that she is the maker of the drawer when she signs a legitimate loan, which she did not do. So it can take the liability to her, though, if it's fraudulent. And I knew, after what I found, I knew no way is my child going to go down for this. I don't care if she's 60. I'm her mother, and she's not going to be, I'm not going to let this happen if I can help it. So I was kind of compelled to, for different reasons than most people, right? I was compelled differently than an attorney would be, or anyone else for that matter. That's my child, and I found this fraud, and I thought, uh-oh. And it was really easy, actually. It was handed to me.
Never, ever get behind a mother's protective instincts. You've got a problem.
Yes,
Agreed.
Mirrors, move over. Here comes the real mom. You know, their mom thing, mom one. And I'm like, I am the real mom here, Mirrors.
Okay, let's move ahead. This plot is getting too thick.
Okay.
I'm trying to get all these pieces stuck together. Okay, go ahead.
After I found out that there were Mears checks, actually written to the clerk of courts, and it appeared that they were written on around the same date. However, I happen to know that under UCC code,
wait,
their code,
hold on. What were these checks for?
For the property. And they've testified, Mr. Holtman's testified, they don't purchase property.
That's okay. This was what the purchase of the property at the foreclosure sale?
No, the purchase of the property at the foreclosure sale happened for Paul Stickle. He purchased the property reportedly in 2006, but these checks were for the 938 South 17th that no one was to know about.
And this is
the one
showing
where they
that
tucked it under the land contract.
It's showing that MERS paid for the property, but someone else bought the property.
It showed that they paid for my daughter's property in 2009, but I believe that it was the 938 South 17th, the one that was found with the anchor date search by the lady who actually worked for another title company who told on these crooks.
I'm trying to figure out how the clerk or who were the checks made out to?
To the clerk of courts, and they went into the judge's pension fund. I found that out later.
Okay. Have you figured out how these checks can be put into a judge's pension fund?
They're put into the cost because a check was actually written back to Mears, and $338 was taken out. That was for one property. Now, Mears is right. The original check was for $16,601 or something like that. Well, then the clerk of courts wrote back to Mears, or to Brian Redmond, the agent for Mears, wrote them a check back for the difference. So it was like $385 that was paid in to the judicial pension fund. And the way that I found that out was from a friend of mine named Donna in Florida, who is a constitutional specialist and was going to be a lawyer until she found out she might have to take an oath to the bar. A communist oath is what she said. So what she did was she did a search on my, I forgot about this. The Mears checks were attached to two warrants from the year 2003 and 2007, a weed lien from 2007 that was already paid, and a tax lien from 2003 that had been paid in 2003. So the Mears was coming in under the pretense of buying the home through these fake warrants or these already paid warrants.
And they were paying off liens that had already been paid off. So this is a way to funnel extra money into the county.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out. They had to have reasons for doing this. Okay. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. That's well. Donna called me up, and she actually sent me the Dunes and Bradstreet filings. And I want to hold on for that for just a moment. The inside that judicial file that I found, there were clerk's notes, and she had parsed out the cause number. She had taken off the front identifiers, like the 89 and the D02, and she moved it over. And then she had the 1209, she had it 0912. She had transposed that. And then the N numbers were all by themselves. So I knew that our clerk of courts, because I called and I talked to him up there as well, and the only thing that gets entered in the clerk of courts is through DocsPop, which is a DOXPOP, third-party vendor. The government usually hires third-party vendors in their technology so that they can keep away from the liability of what was going to be discovered here in a moment. So I knew that this clerk had taken out the 0025, and she had manipulated these numbers, this cause number, and parsed it out, just cut it in two in different places. I thought, why is she doing that? So I get on DocsPop, who, by the way, is within the same block as Title Abstracts of Richmond, and actually the people that own Title Abstracts of Richmond are good friends with the guy who runs DocsPop. He's a trustee at the local college. Well, he said on there, do not ever put zeros in the case name search. And I'm thinking, like I told you, they told me not to do it, so I'm going to do it. So I put in 0025. And I don't know if it got anything on that hit, but then I took away a zero. And when I did that, thousands of warrants came up. Now, it's 1,000 per sheet that came up, but there were 4 layers. And what I did was I transposed those into Word, and then I saved. So when I would go over the hyperlinks, there were hyperlinks in there, I'd go over them and show a specific code that DocsPop had assigned to it. So then I thought, I'm going to put this in PDF as well. So I went and transported that into my Adobe PDF Professional, and when I did that, it gave yet a different indicator for the same transaction, the same warrant. I was able to tie the warrants in the Adobe PDF to countries like Switzerland, Germany, London, England, the Netherlands, all the zip codes right off the bat, the beginning numbers in the PDF format were saving differently, so I was able to tie all of those to various countries.
Okay, hold on.
So I had the word. Okay.
Hold on. We were talking about mortgages. Now we seem to be talking about criminal cases.
Yeah, define warrants.
They were tax warrants.
Oh, okay.
They were tax lien warrants. It was a warrant database. I had to figure out why the clerk was parsing out that cause number on the mortgages.
Gotcha.
So I wanted to know what she was doing with those numbers here, because they were written right on the fake warrants or the warrants that had already been paid. And I thought, what is she doing with these? I want to know.
Yes, and now we're talking about fictitious tax liens. We're talking about fictitious mortgages. Talking about fictitious,
it's not fictitious
homeowners or
I later called the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
The IRS, I talked to them several times about the identity theft. I had to fill out affidavits. My daughter did as well. And I talked to a lady named Kathy Cox, who's in charge of criminal investigations, and she told me to give her my youngest grandson's Social Security number because we'd already done the identity theft affidavit. And she said, Carol, he's got 97 warrants assigned to his social. And
he hadn't even got a job yet. Oh, my God.
Right. He was 4. Then when they...
Okay, hold on. When you say warrants, he's got 97 lien warrants, tax lien warrants?
Nope.
And not...
Nope. I don't know. I'm just telling you what.
Warrants.
Cox
Are these arrest warrants or tax lien warrants?
No, they're warrants for 47 or 49 were felonies, and the rest were misdemeanors, is what she told me.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Wow. Okay.
That makes him worth money.
Okay, hang on. We're about to go to break. This is Randy Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Rule of Law Radio. Our call-in number, 512-646-1984. Dave, we see you there. We'll get to you when we get done. We're back. Randy Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Rule of Law Radio, and we're talking to Carol in Indiana about her grandson has, 97 warrants, felonies and misdemeanors?
47 or 49 were felonies, I was told by a IRS investigator, and the rest, there were 98 warrants, I think, or 97 warrants, and 47 to 49 were felonies, which the warrants
How old is your grandson?
Okay, hold on.
He's 9 now.
Okay, so this is clearly has nothing to do with a prosecution. They're doing something else here to move money. How are they moving money doing this, and from who to who?
Okay. The warrants that I found within the judicial file, I suspect that those are to just take properties, because one of the properties I said I suspected was from a dead veteran, that my daughter was made to look like she married somebody and then gave them this dead veteran's property. So those warrants are a separate issue than what I discovered, what the IRS investigator discovered. This is what Kathy Cox told me.
Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Dead veteran. Is there any chance this veteran didn't have any heirs?
Or he didn't have a will. In the state of Indiana, the attorneys can just put liens on things, and I've caught them doing it over in Ohio, too.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. They got a dead guy that dies here, and nobody comes up to claim the property. So they run this scam so they can steal the property.
Right. And that's been verified by somebody, but I can't say her name right now. She's somewhere within sight of this whole thing, and she told me that's what they've been doing for a while.
Okay, go ahead. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Okay. The warrants are a totally different issue, and that's what they are, is issues. They're security issues or securities, and they're worth $400,000 per felony. So this is my understanding. The criminal investigator, Kathy Cox from Ogden, Utah, said that someone there has accessed our national criminal warrant database, which is in Michigan, and that they're coming from. The warrants are all listed as MI, and that means they come from Wayne County, Detroit, Michigan. You know, the bankrupt city. And she told me that they had accessed the criminal database of the IRS and of the Criminal Investigation Unit, and somebody had accessed it. And it was later verified by an investigator. Chief Chris Wolski, Chief of Police of Richmond, City of Richmond, Indiana, he said, when I went in to talk to him, and I had to tell him quickly because they didn't have time for me, he said, how did you find this out? And I said, does it not appear that he goes, yes, someone has definitely given someone something. They've been into the criminal warrant database. So he verified that. However, my friend Donna from Florida called me up and said, guess what? City of Richmond's trading underneath the City of Richmond Police Department Traffic Division, and it's trading under an unregistered LLC that's with the Richmond City of Richmond Parks Department, Highland Heights Golf Course. And they had actually ran these children. I actually have ordinances in my town, and I won't even bring that up. But anyway, what's going on is they're running these at the IRS level. All that is needed is a valid name, and they can change the last name any way they want to, and a birth date, and all they want is the last 5 of a social, and it has to be valid, and they can make them employees. So my grandson, in several instances, was named, the reported owner of the property was Paul Stickle. He was named Cameron Stickle. He was 24 years old in 2012. He had felonies on the record, and they had taken his first name and tagged it on to this Mr. Stickle's last name, and they had used his Social Security number and made him an employee of the unregistered golf course for the City of Richmond, and that is the man who was investigating this continuing criminal enterprise. And he was investigating because I went to these people, the City of Richmond, to file an identity theft report in October, November, and then again in January of 2012, 2013, and I was told that they would not take my daughter's identity theft and identity theft affidavit until I once again called Laura Roberts, the deputy sheriff, and she said, by golly, they will take your identity theft. She goes, it's identity fraud, and I'm going to call you right back. She made the captain, Profidio, who had previously got in my face and was spitting at me, she made him take my identity theft report, and he was very nice until he saw the affidavit of identity theft and the evidence, and then he called Rachel up. He wanted someone to come in and get the evidence, and I went in, and I said, you mean to tell me? He goes, I'm not taking this evidence, and let me tell you this, me or the state of Indiana is going to investigate. You got that, lady? And I said, I got that, and I won't waste another minute of your time, and don't you dare waste another minute of mine. Well, then I went home, and I made a summary up. Wrote down the facts, and I sent it registered mail right back to him. I said, you're going to try to make it appear as if no one presented evidence, and I want you to know the evidence is here, and you refuse the evidence. So then we transported information up to the Corruption Task Force, the Inspector General and the Attorney General, to a Tim Horty. Tim Horty sent it back down to Chief Chris Wolski, who has done nothing to date. And nothing has been done, and this is how
he's not going to. He's not going to because he's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just the fox watching the hen house. It's every fox in the neighborhood watching the hen house.
And there was one other thing. Those foreclosures in there was bankruptcies filed on each and every one. And remember I said Charles and Annette Scott were the owners of the home reportedly? I looked through the Docs Pop records, the third-party vendors, and it would say Charles Scott sometimes was an attorney, and sometimes Annette Scott was an attorney. Well, Charles Scott, when I opened up that file, it said that Charles Scott, inside that file, 025, the secret court case that I wasn't supposed to see the file, said Charles Scott was Annette Scott's attorney. He had filed bankruptcy papers. I opened it up, and it was Chuck Hyde, a local attorney who has since left the practice of law for 5 years, and he's was wanted on 27 or 29 counts of fraud. So every one of the properties in there had a bankruptcy filed with them. And they're running up through the city of Michigan, those warrants are, through the city of Michigan, Detroit, Michigan. And if you think back to the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, I can go further, Steve and Randy,
okay,
but I really don't want to at this point.
Okay, I have a question. Did you check to see who the bankruptcy trustee was on these bankruptcies? Was it the same trustee?
They're different ones. They're in the federal level.
Good. Then that probably means that the Fed is not a part of the scam. But the fact that they're using the bankruptcy absolutely drags you out into the Fed. Take the state to the Fed to the state. Anyway, okay. Just a thought. I'll stop interrupting.
No, you're fine. There were attorneys that entered this case back in 2012. Wendy Beckner of Foudy and Foudy. There was a Wendy Beckner of Foudy and Foudy. I've accused them of being a foreclosure mill. We had a settlement conference of sorts, and she said, "Why didn't you take the insurance company?" I said, "Well, because it's my understanding they weren't in the room when all this the hazard insurance company it didn't transpire." I said, "But I'll tell you what, we can take you into court if you want to." I said, "Because inside that judicial file, I found that all 9 of those properties you have listed in this type order: file number 4438, file number 4439, file number 4440, file number 4441. I said, "Do you want me to continue, Miss Wendy Beckner?" And she shut up. Well, see, that was back in March of 2013. I had hired an attorney because the judge kept telling Rachel, the clerk did, "You got to get an attorney." So I hired an attorney.
Okay, wait,
this
hang on.
This attorney didn't do anything.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
We're about to go to break. This is Randy 1984. We'll be right back.
Do you feel tired when talking about important topics like money and politics?
Sorry.
Are you confused by words like the Constitution?
Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Rule of Law Radio, and we're talking to Carol in Indiana. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay.
The plot is thickening
I wanted to mention to the listeners and to you gentlemen that when this was originally filed in September 29th of 2012, the mirrors didn't come in until like 2 days after they filed the wrongful foreclosure to assign the property. And then my daughter counterclaimed at 12/28 of 2012, and she named in personal and professional capacity the individuals that I named. She named Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. She named Fidelity National Title, Brian Steckler to be exact. He's an attorney for attorneys, lawyer's title. She named Lingo Real Estate, all the real estate agents. She named Abstracts Title of Richmond. She named MetLife Bank. She named Tennessee First National Bank, and what was the name of that bank that she got the bank that she got the home loan from? I forget the name of it now. Well, it's housed under the one in Tennessee. It was the one she actually got the mortgage from, she thought. So she named all the parties in a counter complaint. She did her admissions and denials, and they have not effectively answered that to date. The only one that even attempted to was after we hired an attorney named Andrew Thompson, who we paid money to every month, and a retainer, a nice one. And he put in an appearance form with a totally new address in another county, and I don't think that's a mistake either. And then on the day of settlement, U.S. Bank attorney Wendy Beckner came in and put in a one-page answer to Rachel's 1228 counterclaim, and it failed to even answer the first 11 pages of the admissions and denials that they originally put in the case, and none of the others have answered to date. So that means they stand as fact. They have not answered those or disputed those facts that were put into that.
Have you moved for default judgment on the undisputed accusations?
I'm on the process of that when I get off of here tonight, and I'm working on it now. But I have done a couple of other things since then. But they brought in a new law firm. They brought in Lewis and Capps, Tammy L. Ortman, and I'm not sure if it's her daughter, Jennifer Ortman. I haven't met her yet. But they brought in an international proclaimed law firm, and she entered into the case around March. She did discovery requests and put in some new exhibits, kind of similar to the U.S. Bank's exhibits. And then I had put in the 2-page document, the mortgage I had told you about. So here comes Tammy Ortman, and, we protest. We denied and objected to trying to basically start a new case on paper through discovery requests. Well, then they moved for a deposition, and we don't have an attorney anymore because we caught the old attorney sifting the insurance funds behind the scenes back in November of 2013. So we've been without one, and we're fine with that. So, but Tammy Ortman came in with these 2 exhibits, a loan and a mortgage. And I objected, or my daughter objected, and she went to the deposition, and I went into the deposition with her, and I asked for permission to be a note taker. And Tammy Ortman threw her head back and laughed, and I said, do you understand that you're committing various crimes and that I have a right to be here and to take the notes for my daughter? And she said, no, you don't. No, you don't. Well, my daughter, she said, if you leave this room, I'll have you sanctioned. I'll have you fined for the whole cost. And Rachel looked at me. I said, she could do that. And then Rachel looked at me again and was panicking because she's been taught a certain way that she has to have a lawyer. And we just can't afford one, and we don't want one at this point, not after what's happened. We've been damaged. I'll never trust another again. So Rachel she looked at me again, Tammy Ortman, this attorney, said, if you leave this room, I'm telling you right now, I'll sanction you. I said, are you threatening her? And then Rachel said, can you give me a minute to this, Miss Ortman? And we left the room, and Rachel said, what do I do, Mom? And I said, just go in there, because this is discovery, and you don't want to cause any kind of scene or anything. I want you to go in there and just tell the truth. I said, the facts of your case. You just need to go in there and watch out for her, because she'll be trying to box you into stuff, whatever. Just do your best, Rachel. I'll be out here waiting on you. So she went in, and I was sitting out in the lobby, about 5 minutes, and I opened up my computer. I was trying to get on the Internet, and there were 3 connections. And all 3 connections, one of them was to the attorney, the other one was to the court reporter, Mr. Connors, and the other one was to the hotel. I went up and asked them. They said, that's ours. The other 2 must be the only conference room we have. It must be theirs. And I could tell it was his. It said Jim Connors. That's his name. He's a reporter and a notary. So we left, and Rachel came out about 2 hours later, and she said she took my driver's license, and she snatched it right out of my hand. She said she wanted to see how my name was spelled, and she took it, and she started writing down. And I said, well, she said, that makes me mad. She goes, I don't even want to continue. And she treated you rude. I said, don't worry about how she treated me. It's on the record. She wasn't being reasonable. She wouldn't let me take notes. Don't worry about it. So anyway, Rachel went back in, and she told me what she had said. She had written down what she had said. She went back in, and she ended up leaving a half an hour later. The lady kept asking her the same questions what Rachel told me. And so Rachel came out. She goes, I'm not going back in there. And I said, well, did you leave that with her, a copy? Or leave that with her? She said no. And so I took it up the front desk, made a copy, stuck it underneath the door, and we left. I come home, and I'm looking through these. 2 days later, we get a motion saying she's moving for sanctions. She's going to charge Rachel for everything. Rachel caused all this ruckus. She didn't answer the questions. She didn't do this. And she had that same exhibit, B, the mortgage. And I thought, I'm going to have to get up here and look a little deeper. I didn't want to go back into the old papers. I went and looked at the first exhibit from U.S. Bank that they had produced in the mortgage, and then I looked at mine with no initials and the two-sided document. This Tammy Ortman took the double-sided document that I discovered and put into the case, and she took the signatures from the first U.S. Bank and transported them onto my document and entered them into the court case without the Schedule
forgery and aggravated perjury. Fraud upon the court.
And she entered them without the Schedule A into the court itself, without the Schedule A. And I thought, why would she be doing that? Why isn't she putting the property description in there? Oh, I bet you she's going to the county property now. And the anchor dates or the dates match up perfectly with the fact that U.S. Bank came into the county property. So not only are they on my daughter's property, but they're on the 4385 U.S. 35 and now the 10,007 State Route 38. U.S. Bank weaves in and out of it like clockwork, just like clockwork on these anchor dates. Remember I told you the lady was telling me about the anchor dates?
Mm-hmm.
They come in and out of it. And she entered that into court, and the judge ruled within 2 days of that motion, without Rachel even getting a chance to answer, that she was going to have two separate hearings. And then after that, she was to submit to the deposition without giving her the 20 days that I thought was required for her to answer this sanction motion.
Overshadowing.
But, well, they're wrapping up the 9 cases within that file while my daughter's sitting here knowing this, thinking it's okay to do this. And it's not okay with me anymore. And furthermore, I went and ordered the transcripts. They sent an ERRATA sheet for the deposition. And I call up the company in New Jersey who provides those transcripts, and they said, do you want both? And I said, what do you mean both? Remember I told you the attorney, Tammy L. Ortman, would not let me attend to take notes?
Right.
The lady goes, she said, do you want Rachel Diddy's and Carlo Isaac? I said, Carlo?
Absolutely.
She said, yeah. They took my deposition.
Are you saying they took your deposition and you didn't know about it?
Right.
Interesting.
They took my deposition, and the transcriber and the court reporter filled it out, and I wasn't even allowed in to take notes, and she actually pled that in the sanction motion. She pledged that this is a non-party, a family member. I told her she would not be allowed in, and she wasn't going to tell anybody. They even named me Carlo Isaac, a guy name. I'm Carol.
Okay, you've ordered the transcripts. I take it you don't have them yet.
I have them. Them. It's me.
What did you say in there? You say anything interesting?
I asked her if I could take notes. Well, I thought I said some things interesting, but the court reporter, who was clearly biased, whenever he didn't write down everything I said, he just wrote down some stuff. So he shouldn't even have taken it, not being sworn in or any of that. He should never have taken it, I don't feel. So, yeah, it said some things in there that under common law exists, and so does my right as her mother, and all I want to do is take notes. And she said, absolutely not. And I said, you mean to tell me that you're not going to allow me to sit in and take notes? Absolutely not.
Okay, anytime you go to a deposition, take 2 recorders with you. Keep one in your pocket, put the other one on the table. And when they tell you to turn the recorder off, sure, no problem, turn it off. They never think to ask you if you have another one.
Okay.
We had a guy from New York call in and played for us the recording of the police officers trying to figure out how to erase the recording on the first recorder. That was a hoot.
Very good.
Yeah, you want to check your state's wiretap laws before you do that, because in some states you've got to notify both parties. Texas is a one-party state. You don't have to tell anybody else that you're recording your own conversation, but
it's a two-party state here.
Yeah, okay. The only one I know of is Pennsylvania. The rest of them are pretty well. No expectation of privacy with someone with whom you're in conversation. Hang on, we're about to go to break. Randy Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Rule of Law Radio. Our call-in number, 512-646-1984. We're about to go into our third hour, and we'll probably do a couple more segments on this and then start taking calls. We'll be right back. And we wanted to finish up with, you were talking about on the break, MetLife.
Yes. When I noticed the buy, sell, buy, I worked for a rather large company. I was an inventory specialist, worked with some database and SAP R3 and did various things around the place. I was very familiar with Metropolitan Life Insurance Company because they were one of our providers for our benefits, and I was there during their demutualization. I actually had some stock in the company, and I lost some money. MetLife back in 1999 was ran by a Mr. Ben Moshe, who later became the AIG CEO in 2011. But back in 1999, Metropolitan Life Insurance Company decided to demutualize. And my understanding of that is they went from a private stock company to a public stock company. So there were three people, Goldman Sachs, and I believe McLean Brothers, partnered with Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. They testified before the New York Insurance Commissioner, Mr. Levin, who later became the Port Authority before 911. But anyway, they testified before him that they needed him to okay everything and let them do this demutualization under an instrument called the closed block. And what that did was it created a trust up in Rhode Island. And it then also allowed them to not only be in the life insurance business, but to also be in the mortgage banking business. So they created the MetLife Bank, and they expanded their divisions, if you will. So they became an insurance/mortgage banking syndicate. So they took a bunch of money from the private, at one point, private investors, and when they went public, a whole bunch of these people that had stock in the company lost a lot of money on the IPO, the way they did the sale. And there was a bunch of lawsuits over that side of it, and they ended up settling, I think, in 2011. MetLife Bank came in and out like a thief in the night, and they didn't tell everybody. Whenever they demutualized, they said, we're going to do a program, and we're going to employ certain people, and we're going to have mutual agreements and understandings with the title industry and the different people, and we're going to do what's called a purchase-sale, sell-purchase program, which they later named a buy-sell, sell-buy program. And we're going to provide each stockholder the chance to sell everything and buy stuff, and there's not going to be any charge. And we're going to create this program, and we're going to pay these employees to do it, and we're going to pay them like 40% of whatever they sell or buy. They didn't tell everybody, we're going to get into the pension funds, and we're going to take these stockholders for a ride. We're going to create this private trust with only certain people that are going to own common stock. And then when we create the bank, we're going to do it on the mortgage side. And that's what I think the buy, sell, sell, buy is on the insurance side, what my daughter walked into, because I actually have the contract with the title company and the real estate agent. I bought it, and Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. So I actually have that contract. It's kind of like a third party, kind of an arm's length transaction, a gentleman's agreement, if you will, that this is how we're going to do this side of it. So that's what they're doing. And what happened was, in the testimony before Mr. Levin, the New York Insurance Commissioner, in April of 2000, or February 2000, the guy from Goldman Sachs testified that everybody else testified they were going to become MetLife, a stock company. They're going to go public. But the guy from Goldman Sachs took it out of context. He said Met is going to become a livestock company. The other guys were quoting Rule 7312 of the Insurance Code of New York, but this guy took that out of context as well, and he said 7312. He didn't refer to the insurance law in New York. So, and then the attorneys came in a year or two later and actually corrected the record. And I actually have talked to Mr. Tierney, who is an actuary who testified at hearings about objecting to this demutualization. So he verified with me that they were doing all kinds of things like offsetting their tax obligation, and he's fit to be tied about this. He's like Carol, and I talked to him a couple of years ago about this. So they testified they were going to start a livestock, Livestock, and he went out of context again and said 7312. So I looked up livestock and 7312 on the internet, and I found a cattle code for the year 1929. And when I looked at the cattle code, it was in an old Google book, and I looked at it, and I saw it in parentheses, and it said updated daily, and it said 7312 in parentheses. Well, when I cursed down, 7312 disappeared, and it went to LIVE. And they talked about creating batch numbers and sequence numbers under common stock. What I didn't get to tell everyone was earlier, the three properties that my daughter had in that file, one of them listed an address of 4294 Highway 35, which was across the street from the 4393 Highway 35. It was a commercial property. And I had went back, and I kept thinking, what are they doing? Why are they going back in years? Well, it was because all three of the properties, there was taxes owed on them. They were all paid in the year 2008 when my daughter bought her house. They were all behind on their taxes, including this commercial property, this 4294. And under that was a batch number of LB 0421 and a sequence number of 61. And it was under the name Michelle R. Northrup. My daughter's name's Rachel Michelle. That's not her last name. So here's her stolen identity tied to these other houses, and underneath the batch and sequence number for the tax is her mother, her biological. That's me. That's my birth date, 0421, the year 61.
I'm not understanding the import of this information.
Well, Metropolitan Life said that whenever they created these common stocks and whenever they were going to create this buy, sell, buy program, they were going to go under batch and sequence numbers. And then they would do related stock with it. And here is in my daughter's stolen identity under these three properties. One of them in the mortgage had a property that was listed different than the 4385 Highway 35. It had a different address, which was across the street. It was a commercial property. So the Treasury, the deputy treasurer at the land record, at the treasurer window, she helped me look it up. She said, this has to be it. And I said, do you think that's it? She said, yeah. She said, I do think it's it. So she wrote her name and her phone number, and I brought it home. And I was looking for the back taxes because all three of those properties, including this fourth one that I was looking up the back tax records for, all of them had back taxes owed in the year 2008. There was taxes owed clear back to 2005, but all of the taxes weren't paid until the year 2008 when they took out those loans. They were all paid at one time. So Rachel paid the back taxes on all three of those properties is what I'm saying. That fourth property that was in the mortgage, the batch number and the sequence number was underneath my birth date and my birth year in a decadal digit, which ties in line with the census because in their world, time doesn't exist. They can go backwards and forwards, and they do.
There's still something I'm missing. I'll have to think on this and work it out. How are they making money this way? Did they swallow the property?
Insurance.
I'm thinking that you've got a property here that owes back taxes, and normally they'll put that property up for auction.
Oh, no, it's owned by the business leaders. I'm sorry. It's owned by Lingle Real Estate, Paul Lingle, the man that owns the real estate place. He owed a whole bunch of money that year. The clerk told me that. She said he owed a whole bunch of money that year, and I'll bet you this might have been part of how he came up with all the money in 2008 to pay it. And she wasn't the only one. He owed a bunch of there's a bunch of taxes owed in our city by some pretty major players like the Common Council people. Some of them, they owe money back tax years, and they're quite substantial, the back taxes.
So I'm trying to put all the pieces together. So this guy has some major holdings. He's apparently got into cash flow issues, and he's running a scam to generate funds to cover his cash flow issues. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm not sure. I just know that he's in with the county and city attorneys, and there's a TIF fund and a CAFR funds, and they're just running a backwards tax scam all the way around. And they didn't just do it to her, they did it to everyone, because MetLife is not going to just pick on a little old gal in Richmond, Indiana, and they're not going to tie her stolen identities to her mother's birth certificate.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is something more local, and these guys are running a scam.
No, it's not more local. It's not more local. The receipt that was generated, the LB0421, with the sequence year 61, is actually a Treasury receipt from the Treasury window at the local land office. It's just that they play these games down at the local municipality level, and people aren't looking for it.
Okay, I'm going to have to probably go over this archive a second time to try to put this together. But there's an awful lot going on here. And if we have any listeners out there who have insight into what may be going on here, if we're going to go after them, we really have to understand what they're doing, and not just that they're wheeling and dealing. It's clear they're doing some wheeling and dealing, but always who follow the money. Go ahead.
It's in testimony. They said they were going to create a livestock company. They said that they were going to commit the act of conversion and do a takings. They testified to that. Metropolitan Life Insurance Company did back in 1999. And Mr. Haltman from Mears.
Conversion, yes, as it relates to real property or to property, is criminal.
Right.
That applies to criminal
that.
transfer. So you're saying that they testified before a hearing that they were going to illegally steal property?
They were doing a takings in quotations. They were going to commit the act of conversion in quotation and do a takings.
I would have to see that testimony in context. Somehow it doesn't quite make.
I'll show it to you. I have it. I'm highlighting it. There's 3 different sets of testimony that I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. And I'm familiar with it because I work for a large company and I lost money. So I'm familiar with the case itself.
Okay, good. Once I've seen the documentation and went over it some, I may want you to come back on and let's do this again.
Okay.
This is way too complex to understand in just 1 or 2 hearings. We are back. Randy Kelton, Steve Skidmore, Blue Law Radio, and we're talking to Carol in Indiana. Carol, can you kind of sum up where you're at and where you expect this to lead to in the near future?
My daughter is still in her home, and we are still in this evidently corrupt judicial court. So we expect it to be wrapped up fairly soon. And the reason I wanted to bring it out is because one of the things that I noticed that I've found where people have reached out for me to help them is they're thinking that these are standard documents. Nothing about any of this is standard. There's a lot of trickery going on. If you see backdating, or let's say, I'll give you an example, 422 Boyer Street. I'm just giving you let's say 422 Randolph Street. It'll have the other property. The way I found the other property is on the same paper. It had 4393 NW 74. That is a mapping location, like a longitude, latitude. That'll lead you to another property. If you have dates that don't make sense, or they're doing a disclosure or redisclosure to you before your closing date, that means something. If there's check marks everywhere on certain documents and not on others, that could mean something as well. But the major thing is, and to pay attention to your notaries. If anything's out of place, it means something. It's not, every single little character on those documents have a meaning. That's what language is about. And it is necessary to read that. It's necessary to read what your attorneys or your representatives are putting in the court cases. You need to pay attention to them spelling your name even slightly different, because there's a meaning to everything, and they have a thing that they do where they can create different identities, and they're running mills within the judicial, and the way that they're doing that is through the federal and state judicial conference. In this administration, they have decided to marry the federal and state judicial, and they're under their case management plan, and they're paying each other through the judicial pension fund and through the victims and lawyers trust funds. And that's the bottom line. That's about all I got to say, Randy.
Okay, you have laid down some work for us, Steve. I think you and I both have a lot of research to do.
Absolutely.
So we will be looking at this, and we'd very much like for you to come back again once Steve and I have done our own research, so that we can ask some at least sort of intelligent questions and not fumble around.
No, you're very intelligent.
There's a lot to wrap your mind around. I appreciate you having me the
opportunity to help. Yeah, well, I thank you, and I want to help other people. It's going to take all of us to get this. I don't want to see people homeless or people accused wrongly of something that they. If either any of us did this, we would be setting our butts in the pokey, wouldn't we? But I'm not. This isn't acceptable. This is illegal.
As complex
and not lawful.
As complex as this is, there is no doubt in my mind that this is not an isolated event. I think that once we start looking into this, we're going to find this is more common than we would first think.
There's a case in California. There's 2 or 3 cases in California. My research partner, Renee, we discovered on her property. There's a case in Colorado, Michelle. She said I could mention her name, and we actually caught the lawyers and the judges there doing the same thing, and they were running that property and a third property into a RESPA transaction. So it's very prevalent. It's everywhere.
Okay, this spells the destruction of the. Well, I don't know. Maybe not the destruction of the United States economy, perhaps.
Right.
But we're not talking.
No, that's not my
about,
goal. It's just to get people to.
Well, we're not talking about
to make
printed
them do their job.
We're not talking about printed dollar bills here. We're talking about commercial paper. As far as I'm concerned, the powers that be can do what they want with their commercial paper.
Right.
But when you start dragging we the people into your commercial paper schemes, now I have a problem.
Small children.
We do believe in self-promotion, shameless self-promotion. So will you tell everybody how to find you on your blog spot?
It's 2 Moms on a Burro, and that's BOROUGH, and it's on Blog Talk Radio, and we do a show every Wednesday, and we try to do it on identity theft, but and then also I've done a show with Randy before, Randy and Steve, one other time a few weeks ago, and then I did another show with Yosef L. on Blog Talk. And that's
okay, well, okay, thank you very much for sharing your time and